welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris. I'm a filmmaker, comedian, and county fair winner for Biggest Watermelon 2011.
I know that's not true, but I wish it was.
I can have dreams even if they're in the past.
Yes, so true. So in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're taking a look at the films of 2007. And in this episode, we're going with my personal pick. And this was a tough one for me to choose because when we were first talking about what year to cover in this season, I was pushing for 2007 because there are so many good movies that were released this year. And so when I had to pick which one do I want to talk about, I had a lot of different options. And I think, Jason, you were actually encouraging me to pick this one over some of my other picks because it's a movie that maybe is not as well known or doesn't get as much respect. And that is Noah Baumbach's Margot at the Wedding.
Yeah, it's definitely fallen through the cracks, even for Baumbach fans, I think, you know?
Yeah,
so.
I think so too. And especially because the movies he made afterwards, I think got a lot more acclaim and a lot more attention, that this is looked at as maybe a bit of an anomaly in his career. And we can get to that much later in our legacy talk. But I loved this movie at the time that it came out. It was definitely on my top 10 list for the year. And I wrote a 4-star review of it in Las Vegas Weekly. And I was a big fan. Having been a big fan of other Baumbach films, I went in being excited to see this movie and feeling satisfied when I did.
Now, 4 stars out of how many?
Oh, out of 15, out of 5, 4 stars out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like this movie too. This one kind of fell through for me. I didn't see it in the theater.
Yeah.
But I'm a big Baumbach fan.
Right.
You know, and Squid and the Whale, which is the one that, you know, he kind of broke through with, which was the movie that came out before this. Man, I love that film. So I hadn't seen this until years later on DVD or HBO or something like that.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but I had a very different viewing experience this time.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that. But yeah, this movie did have a lot of expectations because The Squid and the Whale was so highly acclaimed, Oscar nominated, and people were really interested in what Baumbach would do next. And I think a lot of those people ended up being a little disappointed in Margot at the Wedding. It was not a box office success. It grossed $2.9 million worldwide on a budget of $10 million. So, I mean, it's a small budget film, but that's a bad number.
Yeah, it probably made its money back on cable and DVD.
Hopefully it did, but it definitely wasn't viewed as a financial success. It only had a 52% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and that's as of like yesterday. So maybe including some later reviews, but mixed to negative, a lot of the reviews were. It did get on some critics' top 10 lists, including, as I said, on mine, and some minor award nominations. Most notably, Jennifer Jason Leigh was nominated for Best Supporting Female at the Independent Spirit Awards, but she did not win. So not anything like what The Squid and the Whale had done just a couple years earlier.
Or Greenberg a couple years later.
Right, exactly. And that's why I think it's this anomaly. So mixed, I think, is the right word for the reviews. Even when I was going through these on Rotten Tomatoes, the positive ones were mildly positive in a lot of ways, and some of the negative ones had a lot of positive things to say. Michael Phillips in the Chicago Tribune, he said, "Many is the reviewer who has told writer-director Baumbach to try therapy, not filmmaking, and to start writing some characters people can root for or relate to or something." I mean, that's what the rest of the movie-going year is for. Baumbach's achievement stings. It also has the sureness of tone and direction of a Chekhov story. I suppose if Baumbach had found a way to open some sort of window for Margot near the end while keeping her core narcissism intact, then Margot at the Wedding might have been even better than it is, but I'll take it as it is. And it is full of unlikable characters.
Yeah, but I mean, that's such a BS criticism.
Well, I mean, I think he not,
defends it, I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, even on the Rotten Tomatoes situation, like one of the quotes was like, these characters are too unlikable, you know? And
right.
If you are interested in screenwriting, Script Notes is a great podcast, and Craig Mazin, who let's give him his due credit, Chernobyl this year.
Yeah, hugely popular, but also the writer of a movie we mentioned in our last episode, directed by Seth Gordon, Identity Thief.
Right. So, he often rallies against this idea that you have to make the characters likable. And I agree, man. As long as they're interesting and you can invest in them, they don't have to be likable.
Right.
And But it is true. These are not likable characters.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think the point is the characters have to be interesting. And I think it's a lot harder to make characters interesting when they're not likable. I think Baumbach is one of the best at making unlikable characters interesting.
Yes.
And that's what he does in this movie. But it was a very common criticism. Moira McDonald in the Seattle Times said, Baumbach pulls us in close to the characters, yet never is able to interest us in these brittle people's fates. The look of the film is self-consciously blurry and unappealing, with even the waterfront setting looking as chilly as the iced wine Margot's constantly sipping. Ultimately, you'll wish you could get on that ferry long before the characters finally do.
Hey, McDonald. Let me talk to you, McDonald.
Yeah.
I think you missed the entire point of, one, the way it was supposed to look, and two, the emotional resonance it was supposed to have.
Right.
Disagree, McDonald. I disagree with you.
Yeah, I also disagree. I think the look of it and the fact that it is dreary while they're at the seaside is a big point of the movie, is a reflection of the characters.
Exactly. It matches literally the entire tone of the film. And also, late in the film, there's an incident where Margot's husband has come and they're driving along, and there's a dog on the side of the road that got hit. And, because of its dark dreariness, that kind of becomes a little more immediate than if it was like all bright and sunny out and whatnot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the look of this movie is she says it's self-consciously done, and I think it is, but not in a bad way. I think he really thought about how this movie would look and executed that well.
Right. Dave, would you look up the DP? I know that they used like old lenses, and they definitely wanted it to look like you said, it's not a beautiful seaside. It's a Long Island emotional death toll.
Yeah, this is not a place you go to like hang out at the beach.
Right. Harris Savides.
Harris Savides. Yeah, he's a great cinematographer.
He's a great cinematographer.
I thought Dave had something else to say.
Oh, no.
What else has he shot?
He did Zodiac, Seven.
What a year for him. Zodiac and
American Gangster, Woody Allen's Whatever Works, Sofia Coppola's Somewhere, and The Bling Ring.
Yeah, those are
Greenberg.
Yeah,
incredibly well shot movies.
Right. So it's like, what do you think? He just like fumbled the ball on this one?
I mean, some people may think that, or not. Maybe not that he fumbled the ball, but that he executed a vision that they didn't think worked.
Yeah, I do think it worked. And, man, 2007, that and Zodiac to shoot that.
That is an amazing year for him. An amazing year for movies. Zodiac was, as I was mentioning earlier, one of the movies that I thought, I know it's an awesome year. That's what you were about to say. Zodiac, one of the movies that I thought of picking for this episode. So Kenneth Turan in the LA Times said, though Margot at the Wedding has its share of bleak humor, in many ways, it is an easier film to admire than to actually enjoy. But its saving grace is that, as envisioned by Baumbach and brought to life by Kidman, Margot is a character we can never completely dismiss or totally not care about. Something that's said about one of her fictional creations, he's a loathsome character, but we also feel a strange sympathy for him, applies in full measure to the woman herself.
I don't know if I felt any sympathy for her, but I didn't need to feel any sympathy for her. She is a brute of a woman, shall we say.
She is, but I think I did feel sympathy. I mean, all of the characters, as we keep saying, are very unlikable, but I think he finds elements to them that are sympathetic, where you can see the emotional damage that's been done to them that makes them into these unlikable people.
Yeah, but we see the effects of it, but we don't know how it happened.
Right, we don't. And I think that's one of the things that this movie does well, is it tells you just what you need to know to get without over-explaining things. Self-centeredly, I figured I would throw in an extra review from one Josh Bell of Las Vegas Weekly.
Well, how do, sir?
Exactly. So I, in 2007, said, as uncomfortable an experience as the film often is, it's never less than fascinating and shows how easily seemingly harmless jabs and white lies can mount up into a lifetime of barely concealed bitterness. There's a sort of catharsis at the end, but it's not nearly as pure or as optimistic as the one at the end of The Squid and the Whale. And there's the inevitable sinking feeling that none of these people have learned anything or matured emotionally in any way. Yet that's Baumbach's painful truth, and here he distills it more sharply and devastatingly than he ever has.
Hey, Bell. You listening, Bell?
Yeah, I am listening, actually.
I got something to say to you, Bell.
Yeah.
That's a good review.
Thank you. Thank you. I remember at the time going into this movie having already heard negative things and thinking, I'm going to be disappointed. I love The Squid and the Whale. I love even his previous movies. Kicking and Screaming is awesome. And I thought I'm going to be let down here. And I really wasn't.
Kicking and Screaming is a great lost gem of the 90s. If you haven't seen it, it's about a group of college graduates and who don't know what to do with their life as they graduate. It's almost like the epitome of what the 80s teen comedies were in high school to the mid 90s.
Yeah, like those guys grew up and realized that they don't have anything going on. Yeah, I mean, I think, as I've said and I'll continue to say, Baumbach is amazingly talented and one of my favorite filmmakers.
I agree. There has not been, I mean, what was the one, Mr. Jealousy? I guess that's the most mainstream one. And then there's a lost one that I have never seen.
Yeah, Highball, which is very, very bad. In part because he had no resources to make it. It looks like a student film that was made for $5, which is almost what it was. But but otherwise, I think he's great. And since this movie has gone on to just become even greater, and we'll talk about that later.
Well, so you're Kicking and Screaming, and then there's this long break, and then Squid and the Whale was 2000.
I think it was 2005, maybe
2005.
Yeah,
okay.
So it was just a couple years before.
And also, he was very acclaimed for the stuff he was writing with Wes Anderson.
He worked on The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou and one other Wes Anderson movie, I think, that they co-wrote together. So that's a little look at that. Any other background details that you wanted to mention?
It was shot on location in Long Island and around areas, by the sea, by the bay, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So there were, that was real setting that I think really worked in favor of this film.
Yeah, I agree. And I think going back to what that review said about the look of it, that the locations and the way it's shot, it all feeds into the way that the story is told and the depictions of the characters.
Hamptons, Long Island, Shelter Island. The script originally called Nicole at the Beach. Once Nicole Kidman signed on, they changed it.
Right, they had to change that title. So we'll get into a little more of our general thoughts on Margot at the Wedding when we come right back. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. And in this episode of our season on the films of 2007, we're talking about my personal pick, Noah Baumbach's Margot at the Wedding, which obviously I'm a fan of. But Jason, I know when we were discussing what to talk about on this season, you were really encouraging me to use this one as my pick.
I think so. In the same way, season one, where we were doing 1994 and I chose Cabin Boy over Shawshank Redemption, it was part of the idea that you had said was, well, everybody knows Shawshank Redemption, right? So I know Zodiac was probably your other finalist.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think, my number one film of 2007 when I did a top 10 list.
Which is great.
It is.
But I think so few people know about this as compared to Zodiac that I think we're hopefully going to get some new eyeballs on this movie because it is worth watching. And like I said, I liked it the first time. I liked it this time, but it was a very difficult watch for me this time.
It is a difficult movie to watch. And I can imagine knowing some of your family dynamics. Why? But if you want to, what was it about this movie that really spoke to you this time?
I'll be honest with you. Like, I had to take breaks. That's how angst filled it made me. So there's Margot has a very manipulative relationship with her son, Claude. And let's just say I relate to that quite well, and just seeing the way she was able to utilize whatever mind game she wanted to get what she wanted from her son. It hit very close to home and was really, really hard for me to watch. And that really speaks to how well executed Baumbach did this. And Nicole Kidman, one of her career great performances in here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it doesn't have as much personal resonance for me, but certainly it is a difficult movie to watch. Just every moment in this movie is uncomfortable.
And, her manipulation, she works it in every relationship she has, right? She's kind of horrible as a person. Like, I don't know do you find anything redeeming about her?
Well,
she's a good writer.
Yeah, I mean, she's apparently a good writer, although she's a successful writer. We don't hear any of what she's actually written. But to do the setup a little, Margot, played by Nicole Kidman. She's the estranged sister of Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, Pauline, who lives at the seaside. And Margot and her son, Claude, played by Zane Pais, are coming to the wedding where Pauline is getting married to Malcolm, played by Jack Black, and a lot of family stuff comes up over the course of this weekend. And there is no wedding in this movie. No wedding occurs.
No, it's Margot at the days before the wedding.
Right, right. But yeah, I mean, I agree that this is one of Kidman's best performances. I think every actor in this movie just really, really hits it out of the park, just does an amazing job.
I agree. Jennifer Jason Leigh, we know she's always great, right? But if you're like Jack Black, right? It's so it's offbeat casting.
Yeah.
And man, this is great. You did great, Jack Black. I'd like to see more of this from you.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is something that I noticed that I had said in my initial review, and I think it's true, is that the fact that we expect a certain thing from Jack Black gets you to kind of give that character the benefit of the doubt. Like, oh, he's a funny Jack Black guy. And then he's just as horrible as everyone else.
Yeah, he is. But also, I think, we're so used to that geeky machismo he has. And he just drops that facade. He's so insecure and just needing of approval of other people. It's a really good performance, I think.
It is.
And the kids are all good.
The kids are all good too. Yeah. Zane Pais says, or who his name I'm probably mispronouncing, as Claude, and Flora Cross, who plays Pauline's daughter, his cousin. Ingrid. Yeah. And then Haley Pfeiffer, who plays Maisie, the babysitter / daughter of Margot's lover.
Dick Kuzman,
which is a great character name.
Yeah, skeezy name for a guy you're going to have an affair with, right?
Yes, played by Kieran Hines. I mean, amazing cast. Kieran Hines, John Turturro, who plays Margot's husband.
He's so good in everything.
Yeah, he is. I mean, and as I was watching this movie again, obviously I remembered Nicole Kidman and Jennifer Jason Leigh, but I had forgotten some of those people. So as they were coming up, I was thinking, oh, hey, look, it's John Turturro. What an amazing cast this movie has, just in every little part.
Right. And, they really get the resonance, the emotional one-upsmanship of who needs to one-up the other one constantly, like right away. Claude asks Margot, when they're going to the wedding, he says, about Pauline, I thought she wasn't speaking to you. And Margot says, no, I wasn't speaking to her, but I'm over it. So like she makes it about her no matter what at all times.
Yes, she does. She definitely does. And everyone, again, I think this is a movie where you think at the beginning, okay, Margot is clearly unlikable, so we're going to contrast her with Pauline, who is likable. But no, Pauline is just as bad.
No, she's pretty bad, Oh, what should I tell you? What's new with me? Seems I'm pregnant. I haven't told my fiance yet or anything.
Right. Or my daughter. And please don't say anything. And yeah, I mean, Margot is the most outwardly cruel, maybe because she has this tendency to just say what's on her mind, even if it's a horrible thing to say.
She also needs the most attention. That's part of it. She needs to be the center of attention at all time. There's a scene where they're all hiking and Margot and Pauline are broken off and they're talking about their wild 20s and, I slept with this many guys and, Pauline says, well, I slept with a lot of guys too then. And, Margot says, should we count to see like who had slept with more dudes during their wild period? And even Pauline at that point is like, no, Margot, I don't want to count.
Right. Yeah. I think you mentioned though, when might Margot be sympathetic, or what is there something that allows you to care about her emotionally? And one thing that really, really struck me is a scene early in the movie where Margot has just shown up and she and Pauline are sitting on the couch and they're kind of reminiscing and they're laughing about the fact that their father used to beat them and
that their sister was raped by a horse trainer.
Yeah. And so you can see that they've all experienced this horrible trauma in their lives, and that's what screwed them up. And I think you can take that moment and keep it in the back of your mind as you watch the rest of the movie and remember that, yeah, these are terrible people, but they've also had these terrible childhoods and they've been abused and mistreated. And that's why they've ended up this way.
It is an interesting point you bring up because I really look, they made a scene about sexual abuse funny, right?
Right.
You can't really do that very often.
Yeah.
And they also made it so like, hey, this is a part of their life, but we don't have to focus on this the entire movie. So much so that Pauline responds in that conversation with he says, it's terrible what happens to these kids. And Malcolm, Jack Black's character, she says Malcolm was touched by his babysitter, and Malcolm just goes, yeah, I guess just use that information however you want.
Right.
He's like, well, it's family, you know.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. They have no boundaries, any of them. And yet Pauline is very mad at Margot for having used their family history in her fiction writing. Yeah. And which of course is a potential critique of a self-critique of Noah Baumbach, who has used a lot of his own personal experience in his films, especially in The Squid and the Whale, reflective of his parents' divorce, I think.
Right. And, you know, Marriage Story, the newest Baumbach movie, is all about his personal experiences being married to Jennifer Jason Leigh and their split up.
Right. And Jennifer Jason Leigh, at this point, of course, they were still together, obviously is an important artistic collaborator. I mean, she's not credited here as she is on Greenberg with helping construct the story, but I can't imagine he made this movie without her input. I mean, this is a movie that's all about women and their relationships to each other, that's written and directed by a man. And I'm sure that she had a lot of influence on how he created this movie.
I think so. One of the things I'd say that's a little more redeeming about Pauline than Margot is she seems like a better mother. Margot is just a brutal mother to
She
have.
is.
Yeah.
She really is. Yeah. And then this movie really, the central relationship in this movie, more even than between Margot and Pauline, I think is between Margot and Claude and their weird codependence.
I mean, you feel bad for the kid. Like, I mean, he just knows what he knows, and that's a very small world for a kid. And she's just horrible to him constantly, you know. And it's in a way, it's like to keep him closer and to make sure that he will devote himself to her. At the end of the movie, there's this whole bit about these sunglasses that she bought him, and that, you know, he wanted so badly, and he finally puts them on for her towards the end of the movie, and she says, your face is too wide for them or something.
Right. She's been bugging him about, why don't you wear these sunglasses that I bought you? And then of course, as soon as he does, she has to insult him about it.
Oh, she's just the worst. It's horrible. It's hard for me to talk about. So I gotta say, I'm not gonna say I was insulted like that, but I was definitely manipulated by my mother a lot, and still am to this day. And I'm just gonna be open and honest about that, because that's what this podcast is about. And in this way, how we're relating to this film very differently, but we both found horrible joy in it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can relate to this movie on a personal level per se. I think there's other Baumbach movies that I felt like more resonated with me personally, but yeah, it's fascinating to see these relationships. And I think in the way that Margot and Claude are interacting, you can see how that plants the seeds for how he might grow up and be a horrible person too.
Right. Where does the cycle stop?
Right.
You know?
They're obviously not invested in stopping it. I mean, Margot mentions at one point that she's in therapy, but that is not working for her.
No, it's not. Which Baumbach movie do you relate to? Do you think?
I mean, I think I related to Greenberg maybe a little more.
You're such
that character, yeah. Or even, I mean, my personal favorite movie of his is Mistress America, which is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think that the idea in that movie of having youthful optimism and realizing it's maybe unwarranted is something that I relate to.
Well, he also kind of tackles that theme in While We're Young, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of his films have very relatable themes.
And I personally relate to Frances Ha just because I've danced down the streets of New York to David Bowie's Modern Love.
I bet you have. Right after winning your Watermelon Award, right?
Hey, if you're gonna win, you might as well win in New York, baby.
Sure.
Hey, let's talk about some of these set pieces, because that's another brilliant thing, is like there are small set pieces that play really big into the stakes of the film. There's a scene, they're all eating outside in the backyard, and Margot, being Margot, says about Pauline, you know, to her fiance Malcolm, have you noticed that she doesn't really make eye contact? She just looks like right above you at your forehead. And then she finishes with this line, which is a beauty. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So she just knows how to like just hit on every curve and every incisive word. So Pauline responds by, you know, reminding Margot that she used to be such a good tree climber. They have this huge tree in the backyard, and this gets the whole family to egg Margot on to climb the tree, which becomes a huge deal because Margot, she can't say no to anything that will deflate her ego just a bit.
Yeah, and this movie is so well edited it's only 90 minutes long, but it gets you so much. And I feel like there are a lot of points where he cuts maybe a little before you would expect it to cut. And it just makes the movie makes the scene and the transition that much more emotionally impactful. And there's something like that in the tree climbing scene too, which, because like you said, she gets egged on, she climbs the tree, and she's kind of triumphant that she's made it to the top. And then no one cares anymore. They're all wandering away. And she's kind of looking and realizing maybe that she's stuck. And then we cut to the fire department rescuing her.
Yeah. It just kind of, even her triumphs are not triumphs, as we find out later when she's doing her talk at the local bookstore, moderated by Dick Koosman, her lover.
Yeah, and he is also terrible, of course, and asks her this question in the talk that is completely inappropriate. And she is just so flustered that she literally walks away.
Is it inappropriate to ask that question to a writer while you're talking to the writer?
I mean, I think it's one thing to say, like, is there a reflection of your life in this, and another thing to like get into specific details about the person's life that maybe they don't want to particularly
how much
share.
of this is really about
is based on your, I don't know, it definitely comes off that way. And I think furthermore, even if an objective observer would not have caught that, because we know what Dick's relationship is to Margot and that they've been having this affair, I think we get more out of it. And there's a part where she's decided she's going to leave her husband and she's going to be with Dick. And I believe it comes before with this talk where she says that to him.
The thing.
Yeah, I'm going to stay. And it's clearly this momentous decision for her that she's going to leave her husband and she's going to stay at the beach with Dick. And he basically says, why would you do that?
I didn't ask you to do that.
Right. And it just guts her. And so you can tell that he, in a way, is probably taking pleasure in twisting the knife in her, just as everyone is in this whole movie in the way they treat each other.
Their relationship, it should be mentioned, goes back to their college days where they dated before Margot and Jim, John Turturro's character, her husband. And I will say, even though he's only in it a little, you said like every character is horrible. He's a good character. He's like nice. He's redeeming. So.
Yeah, he does seem nice. He doesn't do anything horrible that we witness.
He saves the dog.
He saves the dog. He buys Margot a pair of slippers that she's very ungrateful about.
Yeah, and then there's this line that's like, it's kind of amazing. So they're outside the animal hospital. The dog's gonna live. Roger's gonna live. I don't care about Roger, you know.
Right.
And Jim just looks at her. He takes his jacket off and he puts it around his wife, like trying to warm her.
Yeah, she says she's cold, I think.
No. What she says is, I didn't even realize I was cold until you put this jacket around me.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And then she's like, she says basically like something along the lines of like, I would never have done something. I would never have saved the dog. Like, I hate you for making me feel bad about myself.
Right.
Even though all he did was a good thing. It had nothing to do with her at all. But man, she's just ugh.
Yeah. I mean, she is bad. And yeah, at the same time, I think maybe because I didn't have as much of a personal resonance with her, I was able to feel more sympathy. She's not likable, but again, they give you enough about her background and the family dynamic that I could feel like maybe not everything is her fault. She's ended up this way.
Well, like you said, yeah, I agree. But, at what point does personal responsibility come
Well,
in?
sure, it does. I mean, they're all adults now, and they need to be able to look back and say, we can try to be better than our parents and be better than the childhood trauma we experienced. And like I was saying before, Margot is in therapy, or she says she's in therapy, but clearly she's not doing the right work in therapy.
And without going into too much detail, that is reflective of my mother's situation, a lot of trauma in her life. But it's been a rough ride.
Right. So, yeah. So I know. But,
let's talk. One other thing that I did want to talk about.
Yeah.
Dude, this soundtrack, come on, man. It's really these like weird singer-songwriter tunes from like the 70s and early 80s, including a great lost classic Romeo's tune by Steve Forber.
I don't know, but just keep saying sounds.
Yeah. It's a good song. I always like that song. But I think it's cool that he really went with like these lesser known singer-songwriters on this lesser glamorous location, with all these, where even Pauline says like, you're famous, and she goes, no, I'm not. Well, you're well known. well, I guess to a small group of people or
Right,
something.
right. Yeah, she's downplaying it. But yeah, the music is really good. And the look, I mean, we talked a little bit about this earlier when we were reading reviews, but this movie looks exactly the way it's supposed to look. It doesn't look like a fun time at the beach, even though this is this beautiful old house and this quaint kind of almost vacation-y place where people go. It doesn't look pleasant to be there. It's always overcast. The beach is kind of dirty and ugly.
Neighbors are angry about the tree.
Right. Yeah. Those weird, almost like Deliverance-esque neighbors who slaughter hogs in their underwear, which was an interesting, weird detail that comes up.
Yeah. I think the dialogue is so good. So crack that whip with the humor and everything.
Yeah. I mean, he's always great at writing dialogue.
Yeah. So, when Margot's Pauline's explaining what Malcolm does for a living, and he says he writes letters to newspapers. Like, he's very meticulous. He's a genius. Sometimes he'll spend a week writing a letter about a music review or something.
Right.
As if that's a good thing.
Right. And she's sort of like, I mean, she's marrying this guy, but she clearly doesn't seem to respect him. And yet at the same time, she's trying to justify it to Margot because she wants to one up Margot and say, look what I'm doing. But yeah, the dialogue in this movie, and it is funny at times. I mean, I think this is possibly Noah Baumbach's least funny movie. I mean, on purpose, but there's dark humor.
I got a lot of laughs, but I like dark humor. There's one point where the kids are talking about one of their mutual family friends' kids. And Ingrid says to Claude, your mom thinks Bruce is gay. And he says, no, she said he has Asperger's.
Right.
That's such a crazy line.
Yeah, I remember a lot of laughs in this, actually, to be honest. But, it's been a while since I watched it.
What?
I know.
You didn't watch it in preparation for the podcast?
Can you believe it? At least I've seen it before. So,
When did you see it?
In the theater.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of the positives that you were saying. I think watching it this time, I was maybe slightly less into it than I was initially because I had sort of the opposite expectation. Going into it the first time, I thought, oh, this is going to be a bit of a letdown. It's not going to be as good as his other films. And now I went into it remembering how much I had liked it the first time. And I did feel like it was maybe a little disjointed. It doesn't really end. It just kind of stops there at the end. And as much as it's okay that the characters are unlikable, it did feel like a bit more of a slog to me. I still think it's a very good movie, but it's not my favorite of his.
It took me 2 hours to watch it. I needed those breaks. That's how tense it made me. And does it really end? I feel like the way it ends, without giving away spoilers, ends on a character beat that makes sense for her.
Yeah.
And also leaves it to your imagination, but you could just see all the further drama that it's going to cause.
Right. I agree. I don't think it's a bad way to end, but it did feel like he just kind of ran out of stuff and thought, all right, this is the way we're going to
Do we say how it ends? I guess people...
Oh, we can. I mean, we were spoiling everything anyway, usually on here. So yeah, I mean, it ends and it's not like a big plot twist or anything. Claude is getting on a bus to go
to Vermont,
stay with his dad and his brother who we never see. And Margot runs after the bus to get on it with him because they have to continue this codependent relationship.
Right. But Claude has asked her to come on the bus to the trip and she keeps refusing. And what this means is we've already found out that Malcolm's cheated on Pauline with Maisie, the babysitter, or they've just made out, I guess.
Yeah.
But then they reconcile. So the wedding, there is still going to be a wedding, but she just left. So
she's leaving. She's not going to attend the wedding. Neither of them are.
And it kind of ends where, so she gets on the bus and she says, did you see how much running I did?
Right. Yeah. She wants him to be impressed.
Yeah. And he goes, I'm really out of breath. And that's about it. She, pat me on the back again.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad ending, but it definitely, at the time I was watching it this time, I thought, oh, okay, I guess that's it. I thought maybe there was going to be something more substantial there.
I don't know. I think it fits the tone of the movie. And, I like that it's called Margot at the Wedding and there is no wedding.
Right. No, I do like that too. And I think that's better. Obviously, they changed the name from Nicole, but rather than calling it At the Beach, I think it's At the Wedding is a more fitting title for it because it is really about the failures of these people and they fail to have or at least attend a wedding.
Failures.
Exactly. So what do we want to rate this out of? horrible childhood memories.
I give it out of 5 horrible childhood memories, which really, I don't have that many horrible childhood memories. It's from the teenage years on, I'd say. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 horrible childhood memories.
Like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 when I first reviewed it. I was a little less into it this time, but I still think, especially even as we're talking about it, there's just so much effective stuff going on here. I will give it a 4 out of 5 this time as well and agree with you. It is a very good movie. It's an underrated movie in Baumbach's canon. And if people have seen his other movies, I hope they'll check this one out too.
And if you haven't, you should watch it anyway, because most movies that you see will have likable characters.
That's true. Yeah, this movie does something that you won't see in other movies. And we'll come right back and talk a bit about the legacy of Margot at the Wedding. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. And in this episode of our season on the movies of 2007, we're talking about my personal pick, Margot at the Wedding, which is a movie that we both liked, possibly a potential personal pick for Jason as well.
Yeah, this could have been, but I have a different movie coming.
That's true. You can stay tuned for that. So the legacy of this movie, because as we were saying, this is a kind of a forgotten movie. It doesn't have a huge legacy.
No, I feel what's, doing some research, some interesting things were that like Nicole Kidman and Jason Leigh and Jack Black moved in together to get the relationship dynamics down. And if you're looking for a film with like awesome relationship dynamics, this is one of them. And I feel like every character's point of view is very crystallized. So, I mean, I get, I was thinking about like The King of Comedy. Did you ever see The King of Comedy?
I actually haven't seen The King of Comedy.
Dave, you ever see The King of Comedy?
Long time ago.
I was hoping you'd say like, yeah, I watched it yesterday. It's not part of the podcast. I watched it yesterday. But I mean, that now is getting a little more reverence over the time. But that's one of these like lost Scorsese classics where a lot of the characters are very, very unlikable. And I think over time, sometimes like that movie is considered ahead of its time. I'm not saying this movie's ahead of its time. I'm saying over the years, maybe people, now that they know more about what Baumbach does and who he is, it deserves a little more reverence as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if people are coming to his current movies, I mean, he's been working with Netflix lately on his last 2 movies. If people watch those and they like what they see, hopefully they'll go back and this will be one that they catch up with, and not just The Squid and the Whale or Greenberg or some of his more well-known acclaimed films.
But I'd watch them all again anyway. Like,
yeah, I would too. I mean, like I said before, he's one of my absolute favorite filmmakers, and this isn't my favorite of his films, but I do think it's very, very good. I think after this movie, which is probably his bleakest, darkest film and least comedic, he took a turn into more... I mean, there's a lot of darkness in movies that he did after this still, but maybe more comedic, especially the movies that he made with Greta Gerwig, Frances Ha, and Mistress America, most notably.
Well, Greenberg, right? She's also,
yeah. I mean, she's in it. She wasn't the co-writer.
But I mean, Greenberg, that character is as big as a son of a bitch as he's ever written. But you have a character who plays against it, who's likable, as opposed to this where not really anyone's likable.
Yeah, I mean, even in Greenberg, and yes, you're right, the title character there is incredibly unlikable, but it's about the contrast between him and other nicer people. And this is the one movie where nobody is likable.
Right. Maybe Greenberg, which was the one that kind of set him to that next stratosphere as a director, and people are like, oh, he wrote a character that nobody likes. Maybe they had to take this appetizer to like be able to take that as the main course.
Right. That is possible. And I think you can certainly see this. I mean, it's not necessarily an outlier in terms of his style. I mean, you can see a lot of what he does in this movie in his later films, and you can see a lot of his earlier films in this movie.
Yeah. It works.
Yeah, it does. It does. But I will say, yeah, my favorite of his films is Mistress America. I do love. And interestingly enough, right, he was married to Jason Leigh when they made this movie, and she's co-credited with the story on Greenberg, which then stars Greta Gerwig, who he ended up and is currently as his partner and has collaborated with.
Yeah, so, well, what will be really, and Greta Gerwig, we know, did Lady Bird.
Yeah.
What will be really interesting is the two of them recently signed on to reboot the Barbie movie, right?
Yeah, an odd choice for them. But But yeah, Baumbach has also done, he is the co-writer of one of the Madagascar movies. So he's done some of this like Hollywood work for hire stuff, which doesn't really have his personal stamp on it.
Yeah, I'll pass on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably have to see it, but it doesn't. I'm much more enthused for Marriage Story than I am for Barbie. Legacy wise, I also wanted, we mentioned a little bit earlier, Jack Black and being taken seriously in a dramatic role. And I was curious, what after this did he do that could be viewed that way?
I got one.
Yeah.
D-Train?
D-Train. Yeah. That is sort of a movie that starts very silly and gets
dark,
weirdly dark. Yeah.
And I never saw King of Polka, but that's another one. And then Bernie.
Bernie was the main one. Bernie, and also Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. Gus Van Sant's biopic that stars. Jack Black is kind of a minor character in there, but he has a whole arc as like an alcoholic who is just broken because he drives drunk and he causes this horrible accident that harms people.
I know you didn't really care for that movie. I didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't, but he's good in it.
But I would say the D-Train is worth seeing, about a guy who's trying to get the most famous guy in their class back for a high school reunion.
Yeah.
And was that James Marsden?
It's James Marsden, yeah. Well, also one of the best things that James Marsden has done, I think.
And Bernie, which is a Linklater movie, probably the most well-known of that bunch, about the man in the small town of Texas who was like a caretaker for Shirley MacLaine's character.
Shirley MacLaine,
an old, socialite with a lot of money. And he does a little murder on her.
Yeah, and that's a great movie. I mean, and that movie
is a great movie because the whole town is like behind him.
Right. And I think that movie, like this, it plays on the likability of Jack Black, where you come into the movie and as soon as you see his face, you're like, oh, Jack Black. And then it subverts that a little.
I'm gonna give you one other thing you should look up from Jack Black.
Yeah.
He does, you can YouTube it, a national anthem at a Lakers game that is so soulful and beautiful. Like, it's amazing. You're like, what? This is the Tenacious D guy? It's an incredible rendition of the national anthem.
Wow. All right. Go Jack Black. Nicole Kidman and Jennifer Jason Leigh, of course, had great careers leading up to this and have been taken seriously a lot in other movies. But I think this is a notable one for both of them in terms of really making use of all their talents. That's not necessarily always the case.
Yeah, I think this is a more out of character style performance from Kidman. Jennifer Jason Leigh, I think maybe might have a little more range.
Yeah.
But Nicole Kidman, man, she brings it hard. They both do in this film.
They do, yeah. And I think Nicole Kidman is really good when she plays that kind of haughty, removed, above it all. Yeah, exactly. That's really her strength.
Yeah, and we saw that in I didn't watch the second season, but Big Little Lies. The first season.
Yeah. You can see a lot of Margot in Big Little Lies. And then it was interesting to me. I thought the kid actors in this movie were so good, and I was looking at what have they done since then, and none of them have really done anything acting wise.
Maisie, the girl who plays Maisie, what's
her
name?
Haley Pfeiffer. She's a playwright and a TV writer, but
she's
not
done
much
some
of
indie stuff.
But yeah, smaller. I mean, I thought, oh, one of these people must be like a big, a TV actor or something like that, and they really haven't. Yeah, Haley Pfeiffer, the daughter of Jules Pfeiffer, who of course is a legendary playwright, and she's had a lot of plays produced on stage in New York and writes, I forget which, but for a few TV shows. So she's taken her career in a different direction. But yeah, I thought, oh, these performances are all so good, and they never really got to that level.
Right, because you think back, Squid and the Whale is the breakout of Jesse Eisenberg.
Yeah.
He always works well with kids. I did notice, I remember in Squid of the Whale, like, wasn't there a big deal about Jesse Eisenberg masturbating or something like that?
Well, I mean, the character does.
Right. Not him personally, Josh.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But I
don't know.
Yeah. In this movie too, Claude, for no reason just tells Margot, I masturbated last night. And she says, you don't have to tell me these things.
You have to wonder if that's one other Baumbach hang up that he's
exploring. He's used it twice, right? Yeah. So you do wonder about that. That is the real legacy of this movie.
That is his masturbation.
And discussion with his parents about masturbating.
And going back to Jack Black a little, going forward from this movie, he's gotten a lot of good dramatic performances out of comedy actors. And we talked about Ben Stiller and Greenberg, who he's worked with then multiple times. And your favorite guy, Adam Sandler, in the Meyerowitz Stories.
Yeah, I do think, look, as a teenage fanboy Adam Sandler guy from the classic Sandler years, and then watching the precipitous drop in the filmmaking.
Yeah.
First of all, Sandler's comedy special that's on Netflix from last year is great. But also, I will agree, he's really good in the Meyerowitz stories. And I know they're collaborating again, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I am not excited for anything that Adam Sandler does, but I think if anyone's going to get something good out of him, I think it's Noah Baumbach. Did you have any other final thoughts on the legacy of Margot at the Wedding?
Maybe I should go see a therapist.
Well, yes. And if it took Margot at the Wedding to get you there, then whatever it takes.
This venture of ours, this awesome
it's all been worth it.
Podcast, if it's affected one person, even if it's one of the co-hosts and creators of it, then it's all been worth it.
Absolutely. So that's Margot at the Wedding, and that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can catch us on social media.
Yeah, Awesome Movie Year on all the stuff. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. AwesomeMovieYear.com. Me, Jason Harris Comedy on all this stuff. Go for J Harris Comedy. And then go for Jason.com.
Tell Jason about your horrible childhood stories.
I don't think I have the emotional capacity to really want to hear them right now.
You can find me on Twitter at SignalBleed, and Facebook at Josh Bell Hates Everything. And you can go to joshbellhateseverything.com. And our producer, David Rosen, has his awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
You can find that at piecingpod.com or wherever you listen to this podcast. And you can follow us on social media at piecingpod.
What do we have next time, Jason?
Next time, another film that relates to my childhood. It's called Persepolis. It's our far-end film pick, and it is an animated feature about a young woman growing up in the Iranian revolutionary times of the 1980s.
Much like Jason did.
Which, a Jewish boy from North Jersey, same story.
So tune in next time for Persepolis. Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.